That night 15,000 people wanted Jimi to play the anthem one more time. Jimi's answer was a single moment of silence, and no one could forget it. The concert was over. Technically. The last song had ended 3 minutes ago. The house lights should have come up. The crew should have started breaking down equipment. 15,000 people should have been filing out of Milwaukee County Stadium into the June night of 1970. But nobody moved. They stood. They waited. And they chanted. One more time. One more time. One more time. They wanted the anthem. The Star-Spangled Banner. The version Jimi Hendrix had played at Woodstock 11 months earlier. The performance that had become legend. The guitar screaming and wailing through America's national song like it was tearing itself apart and rebuilding simultaneously. Everyone who'd been at Woodstock told the story. Everyone who hadn't wished they had been. And tonight, 15,000 people in Milwaukee had just witnessed Jimi play it during his set. They'd heard those notes, distorted, beautiful, painful, transcendent. They'd felt it in their chests. And now, in that strange collective madness that sometimes possesses crowds, they'd decided they needed to hear it again. Jimi Hendrix stood alone on the massive stage. His white Fender Stratocaster hung from the strap across his shoulder, his right hand resting loosely on the body. The stage lights created a halo effect around his silhouette, afro, headband, the flowing patterns of his shirt visible even from the back rows. Behind him, his band had already started to pack up. Mitch Mitchell was covering his drum kit. Billy Cox was coiling cables. The roadies were moving equipment. But Jimi hadn't moved. He stood facing the crowd, listening to their chant, his expression unreadable in the stage lighting. One more time. One more time. Hendrix didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. The tour manager appeared from the wings, clipboard in hand, stress written across his face. Jimi, we gotta clear the stage. Union rules. We're already 10 minutes over. Jimi didn't acknowledge him. He was watching the crowd the way you watch weather forming on a horizon, patient, attentive, reading something most people couldn't see. A young stagehand, maybe 19, first big concert he'd ever worked, approached carefully. Mr. Hendrix? They want you to play it again. The anthem. They really want it. Jimi turned his head slightly, looking at the kid. I know what they want. Are you gonna do it? What do you think I should do? The question caught the stagehand off guard. I mean, they're asking for it. They love it. Why not give them what they want? Jimi's fingers moved absently across the guitar strings, not playing, just touching, feeling the tension. That's an interesting question. Why not give people what they want? The chanting continued. Louder now. More insistent. One more time. One more time. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 11 months earlier. Woodstock. August 1969. The festival that would define a generation. By the time Jimi Hendrix took the stage Monday morning, most of the crowd had left. Max Yaska's farm had been packed with nearly 500,000 people at the festival's peak. By Monday morning at 9 a.m., maybe 40,000 remained. Jimi played for 2 hours. Near the end of his set, as the sun rose over the muddy fields and exhausted crowds, he played the Star-Spangled Banner. What came out of his guitar wasn't a respectful rendition. It was chaos and beauty intertwined. He made the guitar scream, literally scream, mimicking bombs, machine gun fire, the sounds of war embedded in the notes of the national anthem. He bent strings until they wailed. He used feedback as melody. He turned America's most sacred song into a question, a protest, a prayer, and a eulogy simultaneously. Some people called it genius. Some called it disrespectful. Some called it the most important musical performance of the decade. What most people didn't know was that Jimi never intended to make it a statement. He'd grown up hearing the anthem played straight, military precision, respectful, clean. His father had served in World War II. Jimi himself had been in the 101st Airborne before his discharge. He knew what the anthem was supposed to sound like. But that morning at Woodstock, something shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion. He'd been awake for nearly 30 hours. Maybe it was looking out at those 40,000 mud-covered kids who'd stayed through rain and chaos because they believed music mattered. Maybe it was thinking about friends who'd died in Vietnam. Maybe it was all of it. When he started playing, his fingers found the melody everyone knew. And then they found something else. The spaces between the notes. The tension in the strings. The possibility that a song could mean more than one thing at the same time. He didn't plan the screaming guitar parts. He didn't rehearse the feedback. He just let it happen. Let the guitars say what words couldn't. When he finished, there was silence. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. But Jimi remembered the silence most. The moment when the last distorted note faded and 40,000 people didn't know if they should applaud or pray or just sit with what they'd heard. In the 11 months since Woodstock, that performance had taken on a life of its own. It had been written about, analyzed, debated. It had been called revolutionary and blasphemous. It had become the thing Jimi Hendrix was known for, even more than Purple Haze, even more than Foxy Lady. And Jimi had complicated feelings about that. Because the truth was, he'd played the anthem before Woodstock. He'd played it dozens of times. Sometimes straight. Sometimes with his own touches. It was part of his regular set rotation. But after Woodstock, people didn't want to hear the anthem. They wanted to hear the anthem. The Woodstock version. The legendary performance. They wanted him to recreate magic that had only existed because it couldn't be recreated. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the meaning of this moment is still unfolding. Milwaukee County Stadium. June 1970. 15,000 people chanting for an encore they believed they deserved. Jimi stood on that vast empty stage, his guitar quiet, and made a choice. He reached up slowly and lifted the strap over his head. The white Stratocaster came off his shoulder. He held it in his right hand for a moment, this instrument that had screamed and wailed and sung for him for years. And then he bent down and placed it gently on the stage floor. Not dropped. Not thrown. Placed. With the same care you'd use setting down something precious and breakable. The chanting faltered. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Jimi straightened up. He looked out at the 15,000 faces, some close enough to see clearly, most just shadows and silhouettes in the distant seats. He didn't walk to the microphone. He didn't make a speech. He just stood there, empty-handed, in the center of that massive stage. And he waited. The chanting stopped completely. 15,000 people fell silent, trying to understand what they were witnessing. In that quiet moment, Hendrix did something no one expected. He sat down. Right there. Center stage. Cross-legged on the wooden boards like a kid at a campfire. His hands rested on his knees. His head tilted back slightly, looking up at the night sky visible beyond the stadium lights. The tour manager was frozen in the wings. The band had stopped packing equipment. The stagehands stood motionless. Nobody knew what to do because nothing like this had ever happened before. Jimi sat in silence for what felt like an eternity but was probably 90 seconds. Just sitting. Breathing. Present. Then he spoke. Not into a microphone, there wasn't one near him. Just spoke in his normal voice, which somehow carried in the absolute silence of 15,000 people holding their breath. You want me to play it again? It wasn't a question. Statement of fact. You want to hear what you heard at Woodstock. You want me to make that happen again. Pause. The stadium held its silence. But that's not how it works. Jimi continued, his voice quiet but clear in the suspended moment. What happened at Woodstock, that was one morning. One moment. Those people. That field. That sunrise. You can't replay a moment. You can only have new ones. He looked down at his guitar lying on the stage beside him. I could pick this up and play the notes. Same notes. Same sounds. But it wouldn't be the same thing. Because you already heard it. You already know what's coming. There's no discovery. No surprise. Just repetition. Someone in the front row, a girl maybe 20 years old, called out. But we love it! Jimi smiled. Small, sad kind. I know you do. But loving something doesn't mean owning it. Sometimes loving something means letting it stay exactly where it was. Perfect. Untouched. One time. The silence deepened. People were listening now in a different way. Not waiting for music. Listening to words. Every time I play that anthem, Jimi said, I'm trying to find something new in it. Something I didn't know was there. If I just repeat what I did before, I'm not playing music anymore. I'm performing a memory. And that's not what music is for. He reached over and touched the guitar, just his fingertips on the body, gentle. This instrument taught me something. It taught me that the most important notes aren't the ones you play. They're the ones you choose not to play. The silence between the sounds. The space where possibility lives. What followed stayed with everyone in the room, long after the last note faded. Jimi stood up. Slowly. He picked up his guitar with both hands, cradling it like something alive. He walked to the front of the stage and looked out at the crowd, really looked, making eye contact with people in different sections, acknowledging their presence. Thank you for wanting to hear it again, he said. That means it mattered. But I'm going to give you something better than a repeat. I'm going to give you the memory. Untouched. Perfect. Yours to keep exactly as it was. He bowed. Not a theatrical bow. Just a simple inclination of his head. Respect given and received. Then he turned and walked off stage. The stadium remained silent for maybe 10 seconds. Then someone started clapping. Slow. Deliberate. Not the wild applause of encore fever. Something different. Something deeper. It spread. 15,000 people standing and applauding, not because they got what they wanted, but because they'd received something they didn't know they needed. The young stagehand who'd asked Jimi if he was going to play found himself crying without knowing why. Years later, he'd tell his own children about this night. About the time Jimi Hendrix taught 15,000 people that some things are more powerful when you don't repeat them. Backstage, Jimi set his guitar in its case. The tour manager approached, expecting anger or at least confusion. I don't even know what that was. It was the truth, Jimi said simply. They didn't need another performance. They needed permission to let Woodstock be Woodstock. But the anthem. People expect it now. Every show. Jimi closed the guitar case with a soft click. Then maybe I need to stop playing it. Let it rest. Let it mean what it meant. And that's exactly what he did. After Milwaukee, Jimi Hendrix rarely played the Star-Spangled Banner. When he did, it was never the same twice. He'd find new angles, new feelings, new spaces in the melody. But he never tried to recreate Woodstock. Because Woodstock belonged to that sunrise. That field. Those 40,000 people covered in mud who stayed because they believed. Milwaukee belonged to 15,000 people who learned that sometimes the most generous thing an artist can do is say no. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 3 months later, Jimi was gone. September 1970. 27 years old. But that night in Milwaukee lived on. The people who were there told their children. Those children told their own children. The story spread. Not of the time Jimi played the anthem twice, but of the time he refused to. The stagehand kept a photo from that night. Jimi sitting cross-legged on the stage, guitar beside him, talking to 15,000 people like they were sitting in his living room. Underneath, he'd written, "The night I learned that silence can be louder than any song."